Okay, so continuing, we're talking about function as the first characteristic that it's going to be affected or abolished in case of a mutation. Um, and these mutations are most likely recessive. Okay, this allows us to advance to a definition of what we call the wild type alleles that will be considered as dominant. So dominant wild type alleles are those that are going to be conserved rather than recessive. Okay, since the cell may have one wild type allele and one mutant allele, meaning it is a heterozygote, right? The fact that the wild type allele is dominant will most likely prevent the mutation affecting the outcome. So we can say that Mother Nature or evolution or whatever you want, I'm okay with it, has made sure that the wild type alleles are the dominant ones and thus have the best chance of being conserved throughout generations and throughout time. Here I refer to a movie, enjoy it. We have the possibility of two different mutations producing the same phenotype. This means that a phenotype can be caused in two ways. One, two different mutations close by on the same gene, meaning that they are one beside the other that are producing the same gene, the same phenotype, sorry. And the second is that they are going to affect the same cellular function, meaning they're on two different genes, but both of them have something to do with the same kind of function in the cell. Okay. So a mutation that will cause the loss of function, usually because of a missing or deleting gene, is what we call a null mutation. So when a null mutation occurs, some part of the gene is missing or the whole gene is suddenly deleted and we've just lost some kind of function in the body. Okay, a mutation that fails to affect a phenotype means that you have the mutation but it's not observed, it's not affecting the actual phenotype due to insufficient production of an active product is called a leaking mutation. So let's talk about medications, for instance. Let's say that you start taking a certain medication, right? You see no results. So you need to take more and more and more and more until you see a result. All right. So in this case, a leaky mutation means that we have a gene, it has a mutation, okay, but it's not produced. The protein is not produced in such quantity that the mutation actually affects the phenotype. That means that a phenotype may be protected from a mutation due to the amount of protein that has been produced. Okay, so that's very, very important. So it's not only the idea that the mutation exists, but how much protein is produced in order to actually affect the phenotype. Okay, but if the gene is essential to function and a new mutation occurs in one of those genes, it's going to be lethal. Okay, So we have essential genes that cannot have null mutations occur in them because they're going to kill us. And we have genes that do not produce an essential protein in high volumes. And then even if there's a mutation, we won't actually see the phenotype affected. All right. So if we have non-essential genes with a null mutation, they will fail to affect the phenotype. And we have what we call loss of mutation of function mutations. Those are mutations that do not abolish the gene but do impede its function. So the gene is not completely destroyed, but the function is lost. Okay. We have also a gain of function mutations, meaning that the mutation adds some kind of function to the protein. Okay. If it's an advantage, it's going to be conserved. While the first kind, meaning the loss of function, is recessive, the other kind is usually dominant or always dominant. And then we have silent mutations. Silent mutations exist, but they're not noticeable, meaning that they are not apparent in the phenotype. When you look at the sequence, they're there. When you look at the phenotype, they had no effect whatsoever. You refer to a movie, enjoy it. We can also call silent mutations natural mutations. Okay, so that's another name, another term used in the same case. The first type of silent mutations is usually due to a base change. All right, so there's a base change, but it has no effect on the function of the protein that's going to be produced. The second type of silent mutations is due to a change in an amino acid. This is a bigger change, all right? But still, the change of the amino acid has no effect, all right? So we have those two types. Okay, so we were talking about a certain locus on a gene that may have more than one allele, right, for the same phenotype or trait. When a gene has more than one allele, it is said to be a multiple allele gene. Makes sense. You have a gene, it has more than one allele for a certain trait, so naturally and logically we're going to call it a multiple allele gene. Okay? When we have multiple alleles on the same gene, it is possible that the heterozygote will be of many phenotype variations. So we saw that playing with the ability that a certain person can have the information, the alleles for different colors of their eyes, their hair, and so on and so forth. Mutant alleles code for non-functional proteins. Okay, so we have allele, an allele, it's mutant, and it's going to result in a non-functional protein. You're referred to a movie, to a video. So if we have simple cases of mutant alleles, we also have more complicated ones. And in such cases, we actually have a certain decrease or change to the phenotype. Okay, those are mutant alleles that actually do affect function, all right, and the phenotype, but they're just decreased or changed. They don't abolish it completely. So we've looked at eye color in the introduction, and here you have figure 1.29 on page 19 in the book, genes 8, right, for another example of that. So you already have two examples. When we're talking about a mutant allele or mutant alleles, when we're talking about the heterozygote one, it might actually carry only two of them. So we've seen that too in the possibilities of inheritance that we talked about in the introduction presentation. What does the phenotype depend on? The dominancy. So we talked about traits that or alleles that are more dominant have a better chance of being expressed, and those that are less dominant, recessive, have less chances of being expressed, so they'll be rare. Okay, so what we're saying in another way, or this is how it's usually defined, is that when we're saying that a phenotype is either dominant or recessive, it is dependent on the nature of the residual activity of each allele. Okay, so in other words, if a certain allele is represented more in the genetic information that you inherit, it is most likely to be dominant, all right, or to be expressed more. Alleles can also be codominant or partial dominant or dominant. So we have three stages. One is dominant, right? One is partial dominant, and alleles can be codominant. It means that there are different variations and levels of dominance of genes, of alleles, within a gene for the same trait. Okay? If they're codominant, it means that they're equally dominant. If they're partially dominant, it means that they're a bit more dominant than the other. And if they are dominant, or elsewise termed singular dominance, means that they are the only dominant ones that person or organism or cell has. Okay? Okay. Moving on. So we, the book is using the blood type as an explanation, for instance, for a null mutation that has no effect. So for instance, the OO phenotype, when it comes to blood type, is a null mutation, right, that has no effect. So you can read in the book the explanation for that. So basically that blood type has no antigens, so it does not oppose a problem. Okay, so that's a unique example, one of others that there are there. So just go over the whole explanation of blood types, right? We have O and we have A and we have B in combinations between the two, between all three. And the OO phenotype is a null mutation or a null type that has no effect whatsoever, so it does not create a problem. When we have multiple functional alleles in a certain population or regarding a certain phenotype, it is called polymorphism. What does that mean? If we were to check the Johnson family, or the Johnson tribe, and found out that they only have alleles for blue eyes. And now we're checking the Saghiv family, and we find that anyone in the Saghiv family or Saghiv tribe have multiple alleles for different colors. So you can find alleles for blue and brown and gray and green and black. In the Saghiv family, we find what we call polymorphism, because they have more than one possibility of alleles. But in the Johnson family, we don't have polymorphism because they only have alleles for the same kind of eye, the same color in this case. Okay, so polymorphism, is another word for variations. The existence of variations. Okay, we're going to stop here and continue in the next video.